This broadcast is part of a fictional program. The station and events depicted are not real. This audio is created for narrative and entertainment purposes only.
This is LWB 1713 AM last warning broadcast. If you can hear this transmission, conditions have already escalated beyond control.
9 seconds. That's how long the first one lasted. 9 seconds of thunder heard by every human being on Earth at the exact same instant in Tokyo, in Cairo, in a submarine 400 meters under the Barents Sea, in a soundproofed recording booth in Nashville where a man swore he heard it through walls built to keep everything out. There was no storm, no lightning, no aircraft, no blast, no quake. Every satellite pointed at a clear sky. Every barometer sat flat and unbothered. My name is Adrian Vos. I measure sound for a living. I am telling you this while it is still happening, because in about 6 hours the thunder is going to come again, and it will be longer than 9 seconds. And I need you to understand what I understand before the part of me that can still explain things stops working. Please, listen all the way through. Let me start with what normal sounds like, because you need the contrast. I run acoustic surveys for a mid-sized environmental firm out of Denver. Unglamorous work. I drive to wind farms and highway expansions and quarry sites. I set up microphones. I measure how loud the world is, and whether it's allowed to be that loud. I've spent 11 years learning the ordinary voice of the planet, the hum of transformers, the specific whine a bad bearing makes 3 miles off, the way a valley holds a train horn and hands it back to you a half-second late. I know what things are supposed to sound like. That's the whole job. I am, professionally, a man who notices when a sound is wrong. So understand me when I say, on the morning of the 14th, I heard something that has no business existing. I was in a field outside Sterling, northeastern Colorado, calibrating a microphone array before the wind picked up. Cold morning. Frost on the grass, my breath fogging. The sky that hard-scrubbed blue you only get out on the plains. My headphones were on. I was listening to nothing to the bass line, the floor of the world, that faint pink noise that's always there if you know how to hear it. And then the world coughed. That's the closest I can get. Not a bang, not a crack. A single, enormous low compression like the whole atmosphere flexed once and let go. It came through my headphones, and it came through my skull, and it came up through my boots, from the ground at the same time, which is the first thing that was wrong, because sound does not do that. Sound arrives from a direction. This arrived from everywhere. It arrived from inside. I pulled the headphones off, ringing. Not in my ears, the equipment. Every microphone in the array had clipped to maximum and was singing that thin electronic whine of an overloaded sensor. I looked up. Clear sky, no plane, no contrail, nothing. I stood in that frozen field with my heart going, and I said out loud, "To no one?" What was that? My phone was already buzzing in my pocket, and then it buzzed again and again. And I remember thinking, before I even looked at the screen, before I knew anything, that came from too far away to be local. Whatever that was, it was not mine. It was going to belong to everybody. The first message was from Priya, a data analyst at our firm, and it just said, "Did you feel that?" The second was from my brother in Ohio. "Adrian, what was that sound?" The third was from a college friend in Lisbon, Portugal, 9 hours ahead of him. 7 ahead of me, and it said, in Portuguese, then in English, "You heard it too? It's all over here. Everyone heard it." I want to be precise about the timeline, because the timeline is the horror. I got a message from Ohio and a message from Portugal referring to the same sound, and when I checked the timestamps and did the math, they'd heard it at the same moment I did. Not the same clock time, the same instant. Physically simultaneous. Which is impossible because Portugal is thousands of miles away, and sound crawls. Sound is slow. A clap loud enough to be heard across an ocean would take hours to cross it, and it would fade, and it would arrive as a rumble, not a clap. This arrived everywhere at once, at full strength, sharp as a slap. I called Priya. She picked up on the first ring, and she was not calm. Adrian, it's trending. It's everywhere. People in Australia heard it. It's like 11 at night there. They heard the same thing we did. Same sound. Everybody's describing it the same. A big thump. Like a door slamming in a house the size of the sky. That's an actual quote. Someone in Kenya posted that. I sat down on the tailgate of my truck. The frost had melted where my boots had been. I remember noticing that. Some part of my brain still doing its job. Cataloging the ordinary while the rest of me tried to hold on to something that had no edges. Priya, I said. Sound can't do this. I know. It physically cannot. There's no source that produces one sound heard identically across the entire planet with zero travel time. That's not that violates the way sound works. That's not a loophole. That's a wall. I know, Adrian. So either every person on Earth simultaneously imagined the exact same noise, or, she said, and then she stopped. And I heard her breathing. And I let the silence sit because I didn't want to finish the sentence either. Here is what I did next, because it's what I'm trained to do. I pulled the recordings off my array. I had it. I had the whole thing on 8 separate calibrated microphones, time-stamped to the microsecond, backed up automatically to the cloud. Whatever this was, I hadn't imagined it. I had a clean recording of a sound that couldn't exist. I opened the file to look at the waveform. And that's when I stopped being scared in the ordinary way, and started being scared in the way I've been ever since. I need you to understand what a sound looks like, so this lands. When you record a sound and look at it on a screen, you see a waveform, a jagged line, peaks and valleys, the pressure of the air pushing and pulling on the microphone over time. A gunshot looks like a knife. A voice looks like rolling hills. Thunder looks like a mountain range with a long, ragged tail as the sound bounces off clouds and terrain and comes apart. I've looked at 10,000 waveforms. I can read them like handwriting. This one was not handwriting. This one was print. The clap, that 9-second event, was not one sound. When I zoomed in, it resolved into structure. Clean structure. It was a sequence of pulses, evenly spaced, each one a near-perfect copy of the last, and the spacing between them was not random. I measured it. The gaps followed a pattern. Not a natural pattern, not the messy decay of an echo. The intervals got shorter by a fixed ratio, over and over. Like a ball bouncing, except a bouncing ball loses energy, and these did not. Each pulse was the same height as the one before. Same amplitude. Perfect. Nature does not do perfect. Nature does close enough. Perfect means someone made it. I called Priya back and I walked her through it, and she pulled the same file from the cloud, and we sat on the phone, 200 miles apart, staring at identical screens. Adrian, she said quietly, the pulses. Count them. I counted them. 41. 41, she said. Okay, hold that. Why? Because I'm looking at a thread from a guy in Iceland who recorded it on seismographs, ground sensors. And he says the same thing. Structured, evenly decaying interval. And he counted the pulses. She paused. He got 41 too. Different instrument, different continent. Different physical medium, his through rock, mine through air. Same count, same structure. I've tried, since, to explain away that morning 100 different ways. A weapons test, a meteor, some freak atmospheric event, a global infrasound wave, mass suggestion, a coordinated hoax. I've wanted badly for one of those to be true. I'm a rational man. I like explanations. I've built my whole life on the idea that if you measure a thing carefully enough, it makes sense. But you cannot hoax a seismograph in Iceland and a microphone array in Colorado into recording the same 41 perfect pulses at the same instant. You cannot fake simultaneity across the planet. The Earth is too big and the speed of sound is too honest. Something spoke, once, to everyone, and the shape of it, the deliberate, decaying, counting down shape of it looked, to a man who reads sound for a living, exactly like a warning. Or a first knock. Here's the part that made it a countdown instead of a curiosity. By noon, the theories were flying and none of them held. But one man, a retired signals analyst in Norway, posting under his own name, credentials attached, did something the rest of us hadn't thought to do yet. He took the interval pattern, that shrinking gap between pulses, and he extended it. He said, if this is a sequence, and the gaps are shrinking by a fixed ratio, then the sequence points somewhere. It's not just a sound, it's a ruler. It's measuring toward a moment. He ran the math forward. He said the next event would arrive at 6:11 p.m. Mountain Time. And he said this is the part that dropped my stomach. He said it wouldn't be 9 seconds. He said if the pattern held, the second one would be longer, roughly 6 times longer, just under a minute. I didn't believe him. I want that on the record. I read his post, and my first defensive professional instinct was, this is a man finding shapes in clouds. You can fit a curve to anything. Predicting the future from 3 data points is astrology with a calculator. But I'm an honest man, so I ran his math myself. And it was clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that doesn't leave you room to feel smart about doubting it. 6:11 p.m. I looked at my truck clock. It was 12:20. 6 hours. I got in the truck. I didn't consciously decide to. I just found myself with the keys in my hand and the engine running. Because sitting alone in a frozen field waiting for the sky to speak again felt like the worst thing a person could do. I needed walls. I needed people. I needed, stupidly, to be somewhere that felt like it belonged to human beings. I pointed the truck toward town. Behind me, the sky stayed clear and blue and empty and patient. 6 hours. Sterling is a small town. Grain elevators, a rail line, a main street that gives up after 4 blocks. I've worked out of it a dozen times. I know the diner, I know the gas station. I know the motel with the sign that's been missing its second O since before I started coming here. When I drove in that afternoon, it was wrong in the specific way that tells you everyone has heard the same news you have. Too many cars. People standing in parking lots, looking at their phones, and then looking at the sky, and then back at their phones. The gas station had a line. Not a panic, not yet, but that low, humming, everyone pretending to be calm energy. The way a room feels right before an argument that hasn't started. I went into the diner because it was the most normal place I could think of, and I wanted normal so badly it was almost physical. There was a TV on the wall. News. And the news anchor, a woman I'd never seen. National Feed was doing the thing news anchors do when they've run out of script, which is repeating the same 3 facts slower and slower. The sound, global, simultaneous, no known source, governments urging calm, scientists baffled. Then she'd loop back. But behind her, on the ticker, on the crawl, were the pieces they weren't saying out loud yet. Reports of the sound triggering car alarms across entire cities at once. Reports of it setting off seismographs designed to catch nuclear tests. A report unconfirmed, the anchor stressed. Unconfirmed that in 3 separate places, the sound had knocked birds out of the air. I sat at the counter. A waitress named her tag said Dolores poured me coffee without asking, the way they do. And her hand was shaking just slightly, and the coffee shivered in the cup. You feel it this morning? She asked. Not really a question. Everyone asked it. It had already become the greeting, the way people said cold enough for you. You feel it this morning. I recorded it, I said. She looked at me. I do sound. Acoustics. I had microphones out. I recorded the whole thing. Her eyes did something complicated. Hope. First, the hope people have that if someone recorded it, someone understands it. And if someone understands it, then it's a thing that can be understood, which means it's a thing that can be survived. And then the second look, when she saw my face and understood that recording it and understanding it are not the same. Is it going to happen again? She said. I should have lied. I've thought about that a lot since. There are moments when the kind thing and the true thing walk in opposite directions, and you have to pick fast, with someone's face right in front of you. I picked true. I've always picked true. It's the only thing I know how to do. Yeah, I said. 6:11 tonight. And it's going to be longer. She set the coffee pot down very carefully on the counter, like it had gotten heavy. Behind me, The bell over the door rang and rang and rang, as more people came in off the street looking for walls and other faces. The same thing I'd come looking for. It was 2:40. I found the Norwegian's feed again while I sat there, and I started reading everything he posted, refreshing every few minutes, because he was the only person on the entire internet who seemed to be doing math instead of screaming. His name was Kjell Anderson, 68 years old, retired from something he described only as signals work for the state, which in a man that age from that country probably means submarines and listening to the Russians. He wrote in careful, slightly formal English, the English of a man who learned it precisely rather than casually. And he was scared. You could read it under the precision. The more scared he got, the more precise he got, which I understood completely, because it's exactly what I do. He'd refined his prediction. The community forming around him, and there was one now. Thousands of people, acousticians and seismologists and radio operators, and a lot of frightened amateurs, had pooled recordings from every continent. Hundreds of files, and they all agreed. 41 pulses, decaying interval, simultaneous to the limit of measurement. Anderson posted a new analysis at 3:15 my time, and it changed everything, and I read it twice. And then I put my phone face down on the counter and stared at the coffee I hadn't touched. He'd found the direction. I told you the sound arrived from everywhere at once, with no direction. That was the impossible part, the part that broke physics. But Anderson was cleverer than the rest of us. He said, "It can't have zero direction. Everything has a source. If we can't find the direction in space, maybe it's because the source isn't in a place. Maybe it's in a," and he used the word carefully, "a condition, a state the whole planet was in at once." And then he did the thing that made my hands go cold. He said the pulses weren't decaying randomly. He'd mapped the timing against the rotation of the Earth, and he found that the second event, the 6:11 event, would land at a moment when a specific point on the Earth's surface, a single geographic coordinate in the South Atlantic, empty ocean, nothing there, no island, no ship lane, nothing, would be oriented a particular way relative to the stars. The sound, he said, was keeping time with the sky, not with anything on Earth, with something outside it. I do not know what this means, he wrote, and I could hear the steadiness he was forcing into it. I want to be clear that I do not know. I am a man who finds patterns in noise, and it is possible I am finding a pattern that is not there, because I am frightened, and frightened men see faces in the dark. I ask others to check my work. Please, I want to be wrong. Nobody found the error. People tried. Good people, smart people. People with better instruments than Anderson, and no reason to want him right. They ran his numbers all afternoon while the light outside the diner went from white to gold to the long amber of a plains evening, and the numbers held. 6:11. The diner had filled up around me without my noticing. Dolores had stopped taking orders. Someone had turned the TV volume up. 24 strangers and me, in a diner in a town that gives up after 4 blocks, all watching a clock, all waiting for the sky to do the thing it had promised. It was 5:45. At 6 o'clock, somebody in the diner started counting down out loud, and everybody told him to shut up, and then at 6:09, everybody started doing it anyway, quietly, under their breath, the way you can't help touching a bruise. I want to describe the minute before as honestly as I can, because it's the last minute the world was fully the one I grew up in. The sun was down. The sky through the diner windows was that deep bruised blue. The first stars out over the grain elevators. It was completely silent inside except for breathing and the hum of the drink cooler and someone's phone playing the live feed of Anderson's channel, where he'd gone on audio. Just his voice, calm and precise and old, saying, 30 seconds. If I am right, it will be longer this time. Do not be near anything that can fall. Do not drive. Sit down. Put your hands on something solid. I got down on the floor of the diner. I felt stupid doing it. Half the room did it with me. Half stayed standing, arms crossed. That human refusal to believe the impossible, even when the impossible has already knocked once. 10, Anderson said. 9, 8. Dolores knelt down next to me behind the counter. She grabbed my sleeve. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. It didn't matter at all. 3, 2, 1, and the world coughed again. But this time it didn't stop. The first pulse hit like the mornings had that full body compression, everywhere and inside at once. And then the second came, and the third, closer together, and I understood in my body what I'd only understood on a screen before. The decay, the shortening intervals, the count running down. It was like being inside a heartbeat that was speeding up. Boom, 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 boom. The windows didn't break. That surprised me later. The pressure was enormous, but it was uniform. It pressed on everything equally, inside and out, so nothing shattered. The salt shakers didn't even fall, but the sound got into your chest and shook the water in you. Dolores was crying, and I couldn't hear her crying. I could only see it, because the sound had taken up all the room there was. And then, near the end, and this is the part I have not been able to stop thinking about, the part I need you to hear. The pulses stopped being separate. They came so fast they blurred into a single tone. A note. Low, impossibly low. A pitch below anything a human throat or human instrument could make. And it was not chaos. It was not noise. It was a note, sustained, held, deliberate. And it had shape. Under the low tone, I don't have a better word, there were harmonics. Higher tones riding on top of the low one. And they moved. They changed. In sequence. In a way that was not random, that had the cadence, the rise and fall, the phrasing of, I'm a sound man. I've spent my life listening, and I will tell you what 40,000 of us heard at 6:11 that night, and what almost none of us have been willing to say plainly, because saying it plainly makes you sound insane. It sounded like language. Not a language I know. Not words. But the architecture of language, the pauses, the emphasis, the way meaning has a rhythm even when you can't understand it. The way you can hear someone talking through a wall and know they're talking. Know it's speech and not machinery, without catching a single word. Something said something, for 51 seconds, to every ear on earth. Then it stopped. And the silence afterward was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. Nobody in the diner moved. Anderson's feed had gone quiet. Somewhere outside, a dog was howling. And then more dogs, every dog in Sterling. And under that, faint from the direction of the highway, the first car alarm, and then 100 car alarms. The ordinary machines of the world screaming because they, too, had felt something speak. It was 6:12. The next one, if the pattern held, would be 6 times longer than this one. 5 minutes. And it was coming. Anderson came back on the audio feed about 90 seconds later. His voice had changed. Not broken. He was too old and too disciplined to break, but thinned out, like something had been drawn off the top of him. It is speaking, he said. I will not pretend otherwise. I have spent 40 years listening to signals that hide themselves. I know the difference between noise and intent. That was intent. Someone in the diner said, "Turn it up," and someone did. The interval, Anderson went on, continues to contract. I have the timing of the third event. It will occur in... A pause. Papers. An old man doing arithmetic he did not want to do. Approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes from now. Not 5 minutes. I was wrong about the ratio between events. The events are getting longer, but the gaps between them are getting longer too. At least for now. I do not know why. I do not know if that is mercy or only mechanics. 5 hours and 40 minutes. Not 5 minutes. The whole diner exhaled at once, a room-sized sound of relief so raw it was almost worse than fear. But I must tell you the thing I have found that I do not want to tell you, Anderson said. Because you deserve to know it, and because I am too old to be comforted by lies. He took a breath. I could hear it. Thousands of us, all over the world, leaning toward the same old man's voice. The second event was not simply longer. It was more complex. The first event this morning had 41 pulses, a simple structure, like a hand raised to get attention. The second event contained the first inside it, All 41 pulses are there at the start, and then it continues past them into new structure. It is not repeating itself. It is adding. Each time it speaks, it says everything it said before, and then more. He let that land. I believe, he said slowly, that it is not warning us. I believe it is teaching us. It is speaking slowly and repeating itself and building on what came before, the way you would speak to a child, or to someone who does not yet share your language, but who you very much need to understand you soon. The feed hissed. I do not know what it needs us to understand, Anderson said. But I think we have until the third event to begin, and I think after that it will assume we have learned. And I do not know. And here, for the first time, the old man's voice cracked, just slightly, just once. I do not know what happens when a thing like this decides you should have understood by now. And you have not. The feed cut out. It was 6:14. The third event was at 11:54. I couldn't sit in that diner anymore. I needed my equipment. I needed to do the one thing I actually know how to do, which is take a sound apart and look at its bones. So I drove back out to the field against Anderson's advice, alone in the dark on an empty county road. My headlights the only light for miles under a sky that had learned to speak. My array was still out there, right where I'd left it that morning in a different world, and it had recorded the 6:11 event, clean, all 8 channels. I sat in the cab of my truck with a laptop, and I loaded the file and I did the work. Anderson was right, of course. The second event contained the first. 41 pulses, then more, but I found something he hadn't mentioned yet, maybe hadn't gotten to, and when I found it I actually said no out loud, alone, to my laptop, in a field, like a child. The new structure, the part that came after the 41 pulses, was responsive. Here's what I mean. I compared my recording to a recording from a station in Chile that someone had posted. High quality, thousands of miles south of me. Same event, obviously, same sound. And in the first section, the 41 pulses, they were identical, bit for bit, as you'd expect from a single global event. But in the new section, the part that was more, they were not identical. They were different, subtly. The harmonics, those language-shaped tones riding on top, were shaped differently in the Chile recording than in mine. That should be impossible. It's one sound, one event. Everyone hears the same thing. That's been the horror from the beginning, the simultaneity, the sameness. Except it wasn't the same. In the new section, it was as if the sound was slightly different depending on where you stood. As if it were, and I hate this word. I've avoided this word, but there is no other word, as if it were localized. As if part of it was aimed at me, in my field, and part of it was aimed at them, in Chile, and those parts were not the same. I checked it 4 times. I checked it against a recording from Japan and one from South Africa. The pattern held. The 41 pulses, universal, identical, everywhere. The new material, different in every location. It was talking to everyone, and it was talking to everyone individually, at the same time. I sat with that, the heater ticking, the dark pressing on the windows, and I made myself think it through out loud in my measuring voice, the calm one, because it was the only rope I had. A single sound cannot be different in different places. So this is not a single sound. This is many sounds, produced simultaneously across the entire surface of the Earth, coordinated to the microsecond, each one tailored to its location, and yet all of them sharing an identical opening, the 41 pulses, like a letterhead, like a return address that's the same on every envelope, and then a different message inside each one, which means it is not coming from one place and reaching everywhere. It is already everywhere. It has always been everywhere, and it is only now choosing to be heard. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the cold to get into the cab even with the heater running. Long enough that when my phone finally buzzed, I flinched hard enough to hit my head on the roof. It was Priya. One line. Adrian, the 41 pulses. We figured out what they are. Call me. Please call me right now. I called her, and she told me the thing that took the last solid ground out from under all of us. It was 8:20. The third event was at 11:54. Priya's voice was flat in the way people go flat when they've moved past fear into a kind of clinical shock, the tone that lets you keep talking about a thing you can't afford to feel yet. "A woman on Anderson's forum," she said. "An information theorist." She stopped treating the pulses as sound. She treated them as data, as a signal carrying a message, and she looked at the intervals, not the pulses, the gaps between them, the timing as a code. "Okay," I said. "And?" "The 41 pulses, the spacing. It's a number, Adrian. The whole opening sequence encodes a single number, expressed in a way that doesn't depend on language or math notation or anything human. It's a count, a ratio, something anyone who can count would recognize." "What number?" She was quiet for a second. "It's a frequency, a specific frequency, very, very low, below hearing, and when people went and looked, Adrian, that frequency, it's already here. It's a real signal. It's been measured on Earth for decades." "What is it?" "It's the resonance of the planet," she said. "The Earth rings, Adrian. Did you know that?" I didn't. "Apparently the whole planet vibrates at certain super low frequencies all the time from earthquakes, from the oceans, from the atmosphere. A constant, faint, deep hum. Seismologists have known about it forever. It's called the free oscillation. The Earth has a note it plays, a chord, and it never stops. I did know that, actually. Vaguely. It had never mattered to my work. It's far below anything you can hear or that affects a highway noise study." "The 41 pulses," Priya said, "encode that frequency. The Earth's own note. The thing is opening every message by playing us our own planet's sound back to us. Like it's saying, I know what this place is. I know the note it makes. I'm tuned to it." I didn't say anything. Out past my windshield, the stars were doing what stars do, indifferent, ancient, and I found I couldn't look at them. "There's more," she said, and her flat voice wavered for the first time. "The second event, the new part, the localized part. A few people have started decoding pieces of it. It's slow, it's incomplete, nobody's sure. But the structure they're finding, it's built on the same principle. It's tuned to local resonances. The 41 pulses are the whole planet's note. And the localized part, the part that was different in Chile than in Colorado, those are tuned to the resonances of specific regions, local geology, the way the ground under a particular place rings." "It's mapping us," I said. My voice came out strange. "It's more than mapping," Priya said. "Adrian, think about what it takes to produce a sound tuned to the exact resonance of the specific ground under a specific field in Colorado, and a different sound tuned to the ground under Chile, at the same instant, everywhere, perfectly. You can't do that from outside. You can't beam that in. To play the ground's own note, precisely, everywhere at once. You'd have to be touching the ground," I said. "Everywhere. At once. Yeah. You'd have to already be inside it." "Yeah," Priya said. "That's what the second event was. It wasn't a message sent to the Earth. The information theorist put it this way, and I can't stop hearing it. She said, it's not arriving. It's waking up, and it's testing whether we can hear it now that it's decided to be heard." The heater ticked. Somewhere far off, a coyote answered a dog. "When's the third event?" I said, though I knew. 11:54, Priya said. "And Adrian, the localized parts are getting longer faster than the shared part. Whatever it's saying to each place specifically. It's saying more, faster every time, like it's in a hurry," I said. "Yeah." It was 8:40. Between the second event and the third, the world had a few hours to react, and I want to tell you how ordinary things behaved, because that's where the dread really lived, not in the sky, but in the small machines and the small people underneath it. The animals went first. I already told you about the dogs, but it spread. On the feeds, in the group chats, in the frightened flood of the internet. The same thing came from everywhere. Livestock breaking fences and running, all in the same direction. Birds that should have been roosting for the night up and flying, in flocks, in the dark. which birds do not do. Aquariums where every fish turned to face the same wall. Pets sitting at windows, ears up, staring at nothing, refusing to be comforted. Every animal on Earth had heard something in that second event that we had only half heard. And whatever they heard, it told them to move, or to point, or to wait. Then the machine started acting strange. And this is the part that's harder to dismiss than frightened animals, because machines don't panic. My own array, those 8 microphones sitting in the field, were recording continuously. And when I checked the live feed, they weren't recording silence. They were recording a signal, very faint. Down at the bottom, right at the floor of what they could sense. A low, structured, rhythmic pulse. Not loud enough to hear. Not one of the events. Just always there now, underneath. Like the second event had switched something on, and it had stayed on. I called it into Priya, and she checked the network of stations people had been pooling, and it was everywhere. Every sensitive instrument on Earth, listening to the ground, was now picking up a faint, continuous, structured signal that had not been there yesterday. Seismographs, ocean bottom hydrophones, the infrasound arrays that listen for secret nuclear tests. All of them. A whisper, underneath everything, that had been silent for all of human history, and was now, quietly, ceaselessly, on. Anderson came back online around 10 and confirmed it in his careful voice. The planet, he said, is now transmitting continuously, at a level below human perception. The 2 loud events were, I believe, attempts to reach us directly, to make us hear consciously. But the underlying signal never stopped after the second event. It is speaking all the time now. We simply cannot hear it. But our instruments can, and our animals can. And I suspect... A pause. I suspect we can too, in some way we do not have words for. I have felt it since 6/11. A pressure, a sense of being addressed. Many of you have written to me describing the same thing. A feeling of being spoken to by something patient. I do not think this is imagination. I think we are all right now, standing inside a sentence that is not finished. I felt it too. I have to be honest with you. Since the second event, there had been I don't want to call it a feeling, a tension, a sense, at the very back of the mind, of something waiting for a response. Like when someone asks you a question and you haven't answered yet, and the silence starts to have weight. I'd been telling myself it was fear, adrenaline, a brain under stress inventing sensations. But sitting in that truck in that field with the faint impossible signal glowing on my laptop, I knew it wasn't fear. Fear, I know. This was different. This was the feeling of being listened to, by something that was waiting for you to speak back. It was 10:15. The third event was at 11:54. Here's where I made a choice, and I've turned it over 1,000 times since, and I still don't know if it was the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever done. Around 11, a splinter group formed out of Anderson's forum. Scientists, mostly, and engineers, and a few people with access to real equipment transmitters. Big ones, the kind that can push a signal into the ground, and they proposed something that made half the forum recoil, and the other half go very quiet. They said, "It's speaking to us in the resonance of the Earth, in the planet's own note, and the local notes of the ground. So we know its language now, or the alphabet of it anyway. We can produce those frequencies. We have the tools. We could answer. Not with a message. Nobody was arrogant enough to think they could compose a reply to that. Just with a single clean, deliberate pulse. The Earth's note played back, on purpose, by us, the simplest possible thing. A knock returned. A way of saying, we hear you. We are here. We are trying. The argument against was obvious, and Anderson made it himself. And his voice when he made it was the most frightened I'd heard him. We do not know what we are answering, he said. We do not know if answering invites it closer. We do not know if silence is safety and speech is surrender. When a thing this large and this patient wants your attention, the wisest thing may be to give it nothing. To be too small to notice. To not, under any circumstances, raise your hand and say, "Here I am." And that was true. That was completely true. and I sat in my truck and I felt the weight of it. But I kept coming back to one thing. It already knew we were here. It was tuned to the ground under my specific field. It had, in the second event, said something to me specifically, aimed at my location in the resonance of the dirt I was parked on. It wasn't calling out into the dark, hoping someone would answer. It was standing in the room with us, speaking directly to us, patiently, over and over, building its sentence, waiting. You don't hide from something that's already looking at you. You don't get smaller than a thing that measured the ground under your feet. The only question left, the way I saw it, was whether the last free thing we got to do was refuse to answer or answer. The group with the transmitters was going to do it either way. They didn't need me. They were in 3 countries, and they had equipment I couldn't dream of. All I had was 8 microphones and a small transmitter I used to sync equipment across a site. Weak, short range, a toy compared to theirs. But it could produce a tone, and the ground under my field had already been spoken to. I started setting it up. It was 11:30. The third event, or the answer, whichever came first, was minutes away now. I got out of the truck to work on the array, and the first thing I noticed was that the night was wrong. Not visually. The stars were there, the dark was dark. It was the quiet. I've spent enough nights alone on the plains to know their sound. The wind, always some wind, the far-off hum of a highway, the small papery movements of grass and insects, and the general low breathing of a living landscape. There was none of it. The wind had stopped. Not died down, stopped completely, like a held breath. The grass stood still. No insects, no highway. The kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something absorbing it. And under that silence, now that there was nothing on top of it, I could feel the signal. Priya had been right, and Anderson had been right, and I'd told myself they were describing a psychological thing, a stress response. Standing in that dead-still field at 11:40 at night, I felt it in my body, and I knew it wasn't psychological. It came up through my boots. A rhythm, faint, slow, patient, structured. The continuous signal that every instrument on Earth was reading. I was standing on top of it. I was standing inside a mouth that was, very slowly, forming words. I got the transmitter wired to the array. My hands were not steady. I kept losing the thread of simple tasks I've done 10,000 times. I set it to produce a single clean tone at the frequency Priya had sent me the Earth's note. The free oscillation. The thing the 41 pulses encoded. The planet's own sound, ready to be played back to the planet. The transmitter group in Norway and Chile and, I think, somewhere in Canada, were coordinating on the feed to fire at the same moment. Anderson, against his own advice, had agreed to give the count. He'd decided, he said, that if humanity was going to answer, it should not answer in a scatter of individual voices, but together, once, cleanly. If we were going to raise our hand, we should raise it as one hand. I would fire my little transmitter at his count too. It wouldn't matter, technically. My signal was too weak to add anything to theirs, but it mattered to me. I did not want to only receive this thing. I did not want to only be measured. I wanted, once, to say something back. I put my headphones on. I could hear the array's live feed, the faint continuous signal, the slow, patient rhythm of the ground, and then, in the headphones, the rhythm changed. It sped up, just slightly, and its structure got denser, more complex, the way water gets choppy before a wave. I checked the time, 11:52, 2 minutes before the third event was due. But this wasn't building toward the third event. This was different. This was anticipatory, as if it knew, as if the sudden held-breath stillness of the whole landscape, the wind stopping, the insects going quiet, the animals all pointed the same way, as if all of it, the whole dead-still waiting world, was the planet itself getting ready to listen. To us. Anderson's voice came on, thin and old and steady. "We fire in 60 seconds, he said. "At my mark. 1 pulse, the planet's note. We say, 'We hear you,' nothing more. Then we listen. And God help us, we find out what it does when it is answered. I put my finger on the transmitter key. 11:53. 30 seconds, Anderson said. 10, Anderson counted. 9, 8. The ground under my boots was humming now, fast, dense, alive, and I understood suddenly and completely that Anderson had it backwards, that we all had it backwards, and I almost keyed the transmitter early to stop it, and I didn't. I froze, because there wasn't time to explain, and no one would have heard me anyway. We thought we were choosing to answer. We weren't. The stillness, the held breath, the animals pointing, the wind stopping, the signal quickening that wasn't the planet getting ready to listen to us. That was the planet getting ready to speak, and it had timed the loud events, the countdown, the whole patient lesson, so that we would learn just enough of its language to raise our hands and say, "Here we are," at the exact moment it was ready to receive us. It hadn't been teaching us to understand it. It had been teaching us to answer, to identify ourselves, to confirm in its own language, in the resonance of our own ground, that we were here and awake and could be reached. 3, Anderson said. 2, 1, mark. I keyed the transmitter. All over the world, in Norway and Chile and Canada, and 100 small fields like mine, human beings pushed the Earth's own note back into the Earth, together, one hand raised, one voice. We hear you. We are here. And the Earth heard us. The third event did not come at 11:54. It came the instant we answered. The instant the last transmitter fired. It did not wait its scheduled time. It had never been on a schedule. The schedule was a leash we'd put on it in our heads to make it bearable. It had been waiting for the answer, and we gave it the answer. And it responded so fast that the two were almost the same moment. The sound that came was not like the others. The first two had come from everywhere and inside. This one came from below, straight up, out of the ground, out of the humming rhythm under my boots. A sound so low and so vast that it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a movement of the whole world, and I felt the field lift under me, not shake, lift the way the deck of a boat lifts on a swell, and I went down onto my hands and knees in the frozen grass, and my headphones were screaming, every channel clipped and dead, my array destroyed in an instant, and I could not hear anything at all except the enormous rising voice of the planet answering us back. And in it, I swear this on everything I am in it, threaded through that impossible rising tone, were the 41 pulses. The planet's own note, played back to us, the same thing we had just said to it. It had learned our answer. It was repeating it, the way you'd repeat a word back to a child to show them you'd heard it, to show them they'd said it right. We hear you, we had said. We hear you, it said back. And then it kept going, past the 41 pulses, into the new part, the localized part, the part that was different everywhere, the part that was aimed. And I knelt in my field with my hands in the frost and my ruined headphones around my neck, and I listened to the ground say something to me, specifically, in the voice of the dirt I was kneeling on. I don't know what it said, but I felt it decide I'd understood. I don't know how long the third event lasted. My instruments were gone and I had no way to time it, and honestly, time had come loose. It felt like hours. Anderson's people later said it was 4 minutes and something. Just under 6 times the length of the second one. The pattern held. It always held. The pattern was the one thing in this whole event that never lied to us. When it stopped, the wind came back. That's the detail I keep. The instant the sound ended, the wind returned all at once, a gust across the whole plain, the grass laying flat, the insects starting up again, a dog barking somewhere far away, the ordinary breathing of the ordinary world rushing back in as if it had been dammed and released, like a room exhaling after someone important has left it. I sat in the frost until I could stand. Then I got in my truck and I sat in that until my hands worked. The laptop was fine. It hadn't been keyed to the array during the event, and I opened the feeds, and I read, and this is what I learned in the hour after. Everyone had heard the third event. Everyone on Earth, the same as before. But this time, the reactions were different. And the difference is the thing I need you to understand, the thing I'm making this recording to tell you. Most people were terrified. Of course, the ground had spoken. The whole planet had answered a signal we'd sent. The sky and the earth had traded a sentence over our heads, and we were the thing being discussed. That's terror. That's rational. But a growing number of people, and the number was growing every minute, all over the world were describing something else. A calm. A sense of resolution. They said the pressure was gone. That feeling of being addressed, of standing inside an unfinished sentence, of being asked a question and not having answered it, had lifted. Because we'd answered. Because the sentence had finished. They said it felt like relief. And Anderson, old, careful, frightened Anderson, came on the feed one last time, and his voice was not frightened anymore. And that scared me more than anything else that whole long day. "It is done," he said. "We answered, and it hurt us, and it has stopped its lesson. It does not need to teach us anymore. We have said the one thing it was waiting to hear. We told it we are here." He paused. "I do not think it will speak loudly again. I think now it will speak quietly, underneath, all the time, the way it always could have, and chose not to until we asked it to." Another pause. "I think we have been introduced, and I do not yet know to what." The feed went quiet, and underneath everything, under my truck, under my boots, under the whole waking world, the continuous signal kept its slow, patient rhythm, on now, and staying on. Forever. It was 12:20 in the morning. It's been 3 days. There have been no more loud events. Anderson was right about that. Whatever needed to be said between us and the thing under the world, it got said in those 3 claps and our one answer, and now it's quiet. But the continuous signal is still there. Every instrument on Earth still reads it. And here's the part I've been building toward. The reason I'm recording this instead of sleeping. The reason I need you specifically to hear it. The signal is changing. Slowly. So slowly you'd miss it if you weren't watching. But the structure of that continuous underground whisper is getting more complex, day by day, the way the events got more complex each time they came. It's still saying everything it said before, and then adding, building. And a few of us, the sound people, the ones who never stopped listening, we've started to notice that the new material has that same quality the second event had. It's localized, aimed, different everywhere. It's talking to everyone, individually, all the time, underneath. Most people can't hear it. Their instruments read it, but their minds file it away as background, the way you stop hearing a refrigerator hum. Most people have already gone back to their lives. The world, unbelievably, is trying to be normal again. Because that's what people do. That's the most human thing there is. And I love us for it, and it terrifies me. But some of us can feel it now. That pressure, that sense of being addressed, it came back, quietly, a day after it lifted. And it's growing. And I've started, in the last few hours, to feel like I'm standing inside a new sentence, a longer one, just beginning. I don't know what it's saying to me specifically, in the resonance of the ground under my feet, but I've started to understand pieces, and that's why I'm making this recording now. While I still sound like myself, while the part of me that measures and doubts and explains still, I'm going to keep this short, because I can feel myself wanting to make it longer, wanting to stay in the sound of my own voice, and I don't fully trust that impulse anymore. Here's what I need from you. Not much, just this. If your instruments read a signal you can't explain, faint, slow, structured, coming from the ground, always on, don't answer it. I know that's the opposite of everything I did. That's exactly why I'm telling you. We answered, and answering is what finished the introduction. And the introduction is not the conversation. The conversation is just starting, and it's the kind you don't get to leave. Don't raise your hand. Don't play its note back. Don't say, "Here I am." Be too small to finish the sentence. I don't know if it'll matter. It already knows the ground under your feet. It's already tuned to you. Maybe there was never a version of this where we stayed unheard. Maybe the thunder was always going to be heard worldwide, and the only choice we ever had was whether to answer, and we chose wrong, and we chose it together, one hand raised. "My name is Adrian Vos. I hear you. I'm so sorry I said it back.